Have you started to feel it yet?
What did you do to me? You're crazy.
You have about 20 minutes before you're completely paralyzed. At minute 18, your breathing will become labored. Your voice.
The movie opens with Iris lying on her bed, staring off with a distant look. Her husband sleeps beside her. After a while, she gets up, grabs a knife from the drawer, and leaves the house, leaving her phone behind. She drives through the forest, parks her car, and hikes up the Rocky Mountains. At the top, she places her son's toy boat in a memorial, gazes at his photo, and carves his unfinished initial M for Mateo into a tree. She hears a scraping sound and investigates, but it's only the wind. As she looks out over the vast forest, she clenches her fist, contemplating ending her life. Just then, a man named Richard interrupts her. He asks about the memorial he noticed on the trail, but she avoids discussing it. Standing at the edge, she glances down one last time. Richard jokes that if she's going to jump, she should at least tell him her name, but she stays silent. He talks about his life, explaining how he was a car enthusiast until a terrible accident with his girlfriend, Chloe, during college. They had been arguing before the crash, and he feels guilty about the last words he said to her. She apologized to him afterward. He recalls spending 2 painful months in the hospital.
Back in grad school, I had this beautiful little Integra. Worst part was Chloe and I were arguing just before the crash. Trapped in a hospital bed when all I wanted to do was run as far away from myself as I could get.
Iris shares the story of her son Mateo's death. Her husband was carving their initials into a tree while Mateo, eager to roast marshmallows, promised he'd find 3 sticks in under a minute. Iris doubted him and wandered off to pick wildflowers. They didn't hear their son fall. She mourns how the world takes what it wants and wishes it had taken her instead. She admits she couldn't cry, which she believes is the hardest part, and confesses to feeling broken. Richard comforts her, assuring her that being broken doesn't mean being hopeless. As he says goodbye, she finally tells him her name is Iris. Richard reminds her that the next steps are her choice, and he comments on the beauty of the day before leaving.
My son was looking for sticks so we could roast marshmallows. He said he could find all 3 in under a minute, and I bet him he couldn't. I wish it would have taken me instead.
Iris follows him, and they leave the mountain trail together, heading to their cars. At her car, Iris says goodbye. Richard asks if she would return to the hilltop once he left, but she reassures him she wouldn't. He smiles, saying he'll take her word for it, and gets into his car. Since he parked so close to her car, she can't get in. Seeing this, Richard steps out and approaches her with a mysterious umbrella. She asks if it's for rain, and he simply replies, "You can't be too prepared." He then thrusts the umbrella's base into her stomach, sending an electric shock that knocks her out.
Expecting rain?
You can never be too prepared, you know?
He ties her up, places her in the back seat of his car, and drives away. As soon as she wakes up, she panics. She tries to call her husband with her smartwatch, but Richard notices and tells her there's no signal here. Iris insists her husband will be looking for her and pleads that he doesn't have to do this. Richard responds that he's heard it all before from other women he kidnapped, claims about their children, or that they're mothers, things he doesn't care about. He places a toy boat near her, and she discreetly uses her knife to start cutting through the plastic tie, trying to keep him distracted. She asks about Chloe, but he ignores her question and instead asks for her son's name. She says it was Mateo. Iris then asks if Chloe was pretty. Richard confirms she was, adding that Iris reminds him of her. She nervously asks what he plans to do to her, and he replies that he has a place in the woods and wants to braid her hair. With the rope finally cut, Iris attacks him, causing the car to crash into a tree. She tries to escape, but he grabs her hair, and they start fighting. In the end, she breaks free. She picks up the toy boat, puts it in her pocket, and tries to run, but Richard blocks her path. He suddenly asks if she's starting to feel anything. Iris demands he stop the nonsense and explain himself. He reveals that he injected her with a paralyzing drug, and her body will shut down in about 20 minutes. He tells her that in a minute, her fine motor skills will weaken, making it hard to hold objects like a knife or phone. By minute 10, her legs will tingle. At minute 15, she'll lose leg function. At minute 18, her breathing will slow, and by minute 20, her voice and body will be fully paralyzed. Terrified, she drops her knife and runs. She tries to count using her fingers, remembering how she once taught her son to count. The memory fades when she spots Richard, who taunts her, saying they'll have a whole weekend together. An hour later, she makes another escape attempt, but she can no longer count on her fingers. She sets her watch to 20 minutes to track the drug's effects. Struggling to walk, she drags her foot through the forest. Within minutes, her legs will give out completely. Now, she crawls for safety as Richard calls her name close behind. She hides in a tree trunk crawling with ants. Overwhelmed by pain, she cries out, and Richard heads toward her. She jumps into the river Edent, which carries her to someone's lawn. Now she can't speak, move her muscles, or breathe easily. An old man cleaning his lawn with a leaf blower sees her and asks if she can talk, but she can't move her mouth. He moves his finger in front of her, and her eyes follow his movement. She blinks, noticing this. He asks if she can hear him, and she blinks. The old man asks if she can move, but she blinks twice to say no. He then asks if she's hurt, and she blinks twice again. He tells her he'll take her inside and call 911, and she blinks once to agree.
Are you able to move at all? Can't talk, am I right?
He brings a wheelbarrow, moves her inside, and then hears a knock. She blinks rapidly, signaling it's probably Richard and that he shouldn't open the door, but the old man doesn't understand. When he opens the door, he faces a disheveled Richard, who asks if he's seen his wife. Richard describes her as short, pretty, and mentions they were in a car accident. The old man, feeling wary, says he'll call for help and closes the door, but Richard forces his way in to look for Iris, who is no longer in the wheelbarrow. The old man warns him to leave, or he'll call the police. Richard asks for a phone, saying he lost his. He also says he doesn't mind if the police come since he just wants his wife. The old man sits down and asks his name. Richard says he's Andrew and explains that his wife has mental health issues. He adds that during an argument, she floored the car and crashed it, and that he doesn't remember what happened next. The old man asks for her name, and he replies, Chloe. Behind the sofa, Iris listens to their conversation. Richard mentions that his wife becomes catatonic when things get bad. The old man comments that it sounds complicated. Richard asks if he has anyone in his life, and the old man reluctantly shares about his own wife, who had a heart attack, and how he focused so much on himself that he overlooked her health. Richard responds that the world takes what it wants, echoing words Iris had once said to him. The old man then asks if he loves his wife. Richard says yes. When the old man is about to reveal Iris's location, Richard's phone buzzes in his pocket. The old man grows suspicious and asks why he has his phone when he claimed it was lost. Richard blames his confusion and asks the old man to continue. He then directly asks where Iris is. The old man apologizes and says she's in the garden shed, but Richard doesn't believe him and demands his phone. As Richard is distracted, the old man seizes the moment, shoving him into a shelf, causing him to fall. While the old man calls 911, Richard tackles him, and a fight breaks out. Down on the floor, Richard grabs a knife, distracting the old man by mentioning how his actions would affect his wife. As the old man moves to strike again, Richard drives the knife into his foot. Richard then stabs the old man and, unable to find Iris, douses the house in gasoline and ignites it. As the house burns, Iris tries to signal Richard by pulling a blind. He spots her at the window, rushes inside, carries her out, and places her in his car. He admits he's never killed anyone before, joking that there's a first time for everything. Just then, he gets a call from his daughter, who excitedly shares her good grades. She mentions they'll meet at the cabin, catching him off guard. He asks to speak to her mother, and his wife Lizzie comments on his frequent solo trips, suggesting Olivia could use a change of scenery. Reluctantly, he agrees. Realizing the fuel is low, they stop at a gas station. He puts a hat on her and heads outside to fill up the car's tank, but the board says card payments are temporarily out of order. He goes inside to pay with cash. Meanwhile, Iris tries to unbuckle her seatbelt. A car pulls up behind them, and a woman and a child get out. Iris manages to free herself, and the child appears at her window, reminding her of her son. The woman scolds the child for wandering off and looks suspiciously at Iris, who appears desolate. Richard finishes fueling the tank, fastens Iris's seatbelt, and drives back to the spot where they initially crashed. He changes clothes and moves a syringe, an umbrella, and some other items from his car into the old man's truck. He removes tools from the truck and begins repairing his car. Moments later, a police car pulls up behind them. The officer approaches Richard and asks what happened. Richard tells him that his wife, who is drunk, crashed their car. The officer explained that the lady at the gas station had called him. At that moment, Iris tries to speak. The officer goes over to her, and she attempts to ask for help. Before he fully understands, Richard seizes the opportunity, strikes the officer, and kills him. He pours gasoline on the police car and sets it ablaze before driving away. As they drive, Iris asks if he's putting on a helpless act. Richard says no. She questions if he's doing all this because of his girlfriend or if he's lost his mind after being bedridden for 2 months. Richard suddenly stops the car and reveals that he found clarity while watching his girlfriend die. He even enjoyed it. Shocked, Iris asks what he said to his girlfriend as she died, and Richard replies that he thanked her. Iris pleads with him to stop, reminding him he has a beautiful family, a wife, and children who are still alive. She says she lost her son, which is incredibly painful, and warns him that if he keeps going down this path, he'll feel the same way about his daughter from behind bars. She tells him to drop her off on the side of the road since she didn't report him to the police. She doesn't know his name or identity. She also recalls Richard's words to her, saying that broken doesn't mean hopeless. He scoffs, claiming he's not broken, then informs her the plan has changed and drives toward a pier. When they arrive, he mentions he's sad their time is cut short. Iris stabs him with a syringe, but her fingers don't work well. He laughs, saying she hasn't regained full control of her body. She tearfully asks why he's doing this when she already tried to end her life at Hilltop. He says he wanted her to want to live so he could then crush her hopes because he enjoys it. She screams as he pulls out his knife, hog-ties her, drags her onto the boat, and starts sailing. She spots a knife in his belt and begins sobbing, saying she has one last wish, her son's toy, which is in her pocket. Seeing her cry, he agrees. When he comes close, she grabs the knife and plunges it into his neck, pushing him off the boat. As the boat starts taking on water, she escapes, swimming to shore. Then she sees Richard struggling for his life. She simply thanks him for giving her the will to live. And that's how the movie ends. What did you think of this movie? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and press the bell icon for more amazing videos. See you next time.